All right, everyone. Welcome to October's Ladies at UX Talk. We are going to be sharing our knowledge just like a classroom format for Enterprise UX 101. I am Aly. As Ying has mentioned, I am Senior Product Designer for something that is an enterprise security product, which pretty much means it keeps your facility secure. Now, in terms of where the software ends up, prisons, airports, office buildings, stadiums, universities, bus depots, and a whole bunch of other things that I don't know where it will go, but it'll end up there to essentially manage the access and video systems of to make the site secure. So I've also designed software for managing energy efficiency in buildings. I've designed software for quantum computers, like industrial applications, as well as a medical device. So that is essentially the breadth of my knowledge that I'm bringing to this talk. And Ashoomi, do you want to introduce yourself real quickly?
Yes. Hey, everyone. This is so exciting. I'm Ashoomi, as Ying said that I am a senior researcher and strategist at Honeywell. So basically, why are we here today? I wanted to give a little bit of context when I say about enterprise design. So I have been in the business of designing business for almost a decade now. And as Ying was pointing out, we've always, as UX design, we've always put a lot of focus on consumer applications. And when we ended up getting into the industry, there wasn't a lot of tools, tips and tricks, or best practices that we could follow. Again, enterprise and consumer applications, they're not very different, but they are still different in a way where we are like, okay, how can we do this more better? So today, what Aly and I are going to be doing is we are going to take you guys through our tooltip, give you a lot of tooltips. We are going to take you through our toolkit, and you will basically have some stuff that you all can actually take and run with. Again, this presentation is going to be a lot of information, and it can get overwhelming if you are new to the concept of enterprise design. But throughout our process, we have a lot of question sections. So as we are progressing, we will actually encourage you to put your questions in the chat. And whenever we take intermissions between sections, we would like to address any of those questions. I am going to let Aly kick us off.
So, believe it or not, enterprise UX runs the world. If you ever go to a movie theater, we're just talking about this, the ventilation system to make sure that the airflow continues, the security of that facility is run by enterprise software you would not even imagine. Now, say there is this impression in the industry that enterprise UX is generally cumbersome, it's complex. There's a lot of legacy applications. It's very technically focused, which is all very, very true, but it's also necessary for keeping this planet running. Now, when you're working with your realtor, for example, there are certain types of applications that they use in order to make sure that you get your name on the deed. If you're buying furniture for your said house, like your IKEA customer service representative will be using enterprise software in order to make sure that the furniture gets from whichever warehouse it's currently stocked at, and it actually ends up either in the store or in your house. Now, say IKEA was going to buy glue from somewhere. Now, there is certain pieces of software that essentially tries to help produce chemicals and have how to say this, the right output so that IKEA gets the right chemicals that they need for their glue. Now, it comes down to all of it. This software can look very, very complex, but it also means that there is a lot of design opportunities. It needs a lot of love from the UX community. And we'd like to get more of you guys to join this side. Oh, it could be an Avril Lavigne gift. I thought about it, but this is more relevant. All right, so survey results. Last month, we actually asked Vanna and Ying and the rest of the organizers at Ladies at UX to give us an understanding of where our audience is at in terms of their understanding of enterprise UX. And surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, most of you have ended up working for consumer applications, which is great. This talk will be super relevant for you if you decided to, maybe you're thinking about moving into the space. In terms of what you're curious about learning, end-to-end best practice and processes. So we'll cover a lot of that during the talk, and how we essentially manage complexity in our day-to-day jobs so that we can get the best outcome for UX as possible. Now, in terms of what we'll cover today, we are going to define enterprise UX in the best way that we can. And then we're going to talk through the process of how we deliver product out in the market, and then afterwards integrate UX and enterprise teams. As Ashoomi has already covered before, we are going to be answering questions pretty much in different places through this presentation. So if there is like a question that comes to the top of your mind, we'll get to it very quickly so that we don't lose context of where it's at. All right, Ashoomi, you want to kick us off again?
Yes. So what is software for enterprise? When we speak about enterprise, let's take an example of how businesses in the supply chain runs a software. So everybody uses websites and applications to order something online. So just to give you guys a little bit of context of what happens after you place your order online. After you place your order online, there is an online seller who actually gets the requirement to say that there was an e-commerce order that was placed. When that seller actually receives that order, that system is connected to the warehouse where the item is actually stored. So for example, if you guys would have selected standard shipping, that is to get your item in 2 days, what happens is when the warehouse receives that e-commerce orders, they will wait till the certain part of the day to be like, oh, there are now 10 e-commerce orders, and we can now start picking all of that. And when I say picking, literally, like in warehouses, you have aisles, people will actually go pick that order, and they will make sure that it gets shipped. And if it's in the local city, you will make sure that by the next day, your order is shipped out and you will receive it in 2 days. But when the warehouse ships out that item, there is an inventory that has actually, they've depleted that inventory. So that actually goes to a manufacturer saying that, oh, they have now, this warehouse has shipped out 10 items, they need 10 more items. And manufacturer, more the demand, more the supplier. So if you see all these 6 businesses that are online, only the number 6 where you actually use is the consumer application, but all of these different components are businesses. And if you will not believe it, everything is run by software today. And the applications that we looked at previously were some of the applications, and you saw how much love it needed because they were such complicated interfaces, and they are doing such complicated tasks. So let's look at this component of what that business actually means. So if you talk about a business, it has a very complex ecosystem, right? There are people, the business consists of people, assets, data, tasks, processes, and customers. Now, all of this is basically a node that will make up a business. So now when when we think about B2C, the B2C is just that online enterprise who sells that item to you, and C is the consumer. But if you see this component actually goes from B to B to B to B to B to C. You saw how many businesses there has to exist to make sure that you get that cat litter that you have ordered for at the right time, and making sure that it is actually the item that you ordered. So we understand that all of this is a lot of people who are making this business run today. And enterprise design is basically designing for people at work. And now businesses, and all of us know about these businesses. When you go to a hospital, when you go to a doctor, they use systems that are business softwares. When you are actually monitoring the safety of your house or your building, there are security cameras that people like Ying and Aly work on. If you're talking about process engineers who actually work in chemical plants, warehouses, all of this are different businesses which actually have people who work at them and making sure that our life is more comfortable today. Again, pointing out some of the attributes of how these businesses are different from some of the consumer lifestyles that we have, right? Or the consumer applications that we use. If we talk about design for people at work, we have multiple, sorry.
I know they look good. I know they're great tits.
There is someone who needs to mute their audio.
I'll be the mute police. Let's see.
No worries.
I got
Thank
it.
you.
Yep. Thank you.
So talking about how are these businesses different from our consumer applications, right? Businesses usually have a lot of different users, and these users have different roles that do different job functions. They are managing operations in their workplace. These applications have much longer lifespan because they are actually functions that need to be set up and need to be conducted over a longer period of time. It's not that somebody's not shopping online, so we need to switch the way we do our things because the business is not happening. Your people take a lot of time to make sure that the functions are set up and those functions can continue for a long time to make sure that people can still do their work and it's not changing every day. It's very task focused because people are doing serious work and we do need to make sure that our software actually directs them directly what they need to do. These applications also have to be scalable because these applications are not built in a day. They have longer lifespan, and since they are longer lifespan, we need to make sure that they are scalable because we might not be able to build everything or include everything in the software today, but we might take sometimes months, years to make sure that we can add some of these processes and make things efficient over time. There are a lot of data that these softwares need to manage, and they have internal and external customers as well. So, what does this say? Yes, enterprise software can get really complicated, but again, as designers, our job is to make this simple. We need to make sure that we can actually make this as simple. The goal should be to make it as simple as our consumer application, so people who are doing their jobs can love what they do and they can have fun and they can be more efficient at the work that they do. So people like Ali and me volunteered ourselves to keep working in this industry and making this thing better. And we have a lot of people over here like Vanna, Yang, and I'm sure many of you are in enterprise design. So thank you. I know it's complicated, but we love complexity, and it's an honor to be a part, to be designing on this side of the scene. All right. So this is our time. If we have any questions, Ali, do we have any questions that we can address?
So far.
All right. We have a very smart audience, or you guys just need to be a little more curious about, if you guys don't get anything, just let us know and we will break it down for you. All right. So talking about UX design and how can we make all of this a little better in how we incorporate some of this in our work. Oh, I had actually thought about an opening to make this thing a little more dramatic, but never mind, I just moved on. So what is enterprise design? Not to make it scary and be like, oh my God, it's completely different. You guys have to learn new ways of doing things. No, enterprise design is very similar to how we do consumer application, but it's just a little different, right? So today what we are going to do, we've broken down this entire process into 5 phases, from vision to discovery to define, design and delivery stage. So the process over here of what we have done, again, all of these phases have a lot of information, and we've tried to keep it simple in dividing some of this information so you guys can take those takeaways. And again, The screens can get a lot of information. We've put a lot of information on the screen. Make sure you can take snapshots and then reach out to us if you have more questions about it. We just want to make sure that don't get overwhelmed. We will try to keep this simple for you. All right, so we are going to start with the vision stage. Know the why, right? Before we design anything, we need to understand what problems. The first step is to understand the problem that we are trying to solve and recognize that the problem even exists. So if we have any newsroom fans in the house, that's Wilma McAvoy who was saying that, right? We don't want to create anything that just does not make sense, or we need to validate why we need to create something and why we are doing this. So what is vision, right? Vision is basically 3 steps, right? Product market fit, setting the vision, and sharing the vision. When we speak about product market fit, vision is usually a stage where designers, based on the maturity of the organization, designers and researchers will be involved at this vision stage, but otherwise most of the partners who are defining this vision our product partners, our marketing, engineering, and operations who define or who have the funds to make this product, right? When we talk about product market fit, what are we trying to understand? We want to make sure that the product that we are creating is something that the market actually needs, right? We are creating a product that would identify the underserved customer needs. We don't want to create something that will not really have any value for the product, right? So making sure that this product fits the market that we are trying to target. Setting the vision, right? We need to set the vision. We need to understand what problems are we trying to solve, who are we creating this for, and how is this product going to help us make money, right? This is what, before the problems even come to the UX phase, this is what our product teams are doing, right? And this is for just our understanding. What happens before they come and be like, guys, we want you to get involved in this project. We have the funds. We want you to design and research this thing. So this is what they are doing at that phase. And now when the product is decided that, okay, we know what we are doing, we have a vision for this, now they need to make sure that this vision is actually created in collaboration with the key stakeholders. And it is also something that everybody agrees that why we need to put in time and money into this. There are a lot of processes that are used or frameworks that are used at this stage by our product teams, but that's something that we can get into offline if you all are interested in how some of these things are done. Next stage, after vision, is the part which comes to research teams and design teams to get involved. When we are asking about being curious, it's about researchers go understand, to find ideas, find problems, talk to people. This is the time they get in touch with us and they're like, okay, do something and let us know who are we creating what for and how are we doing this, right? So what is research? 3 steps again: observe, capture, and understand. When we are talking about observing is something that we need to understand. When we are talking about enterprise designs, our users are not consumers like you and me. They just don't sit under in their homes and they're using these applications. These are very special users who have special skills and they are working probably, again, in a warehouse. If you see, this lady is actually wearing a device in her hand and she's trying to use the RF gun to make sure that as the packages pass, she will be scanning them to make sure that that package was delivered or, is getting delivered to the place that it needs to go. So if you see, this is probably a lady in her 60s who's standing over there. I actually went and I clicked this photo. So something that was there, that she was standing and she's like, you guys have given us very heavy devices. I can't wear them all the time. And if I wouldn't have understood the context, and I went late in the process where I was like, okay, oops, we didn't really know who our target users was. These older users, they had already found different ways of doing their jobs. Some of them had removed the heavy devices from their hand, kept it away. They had found, because they had found different ways of doing this. And the idea is, again, to be efficient. Everybody wants to work and go home, right? So we need to make sure when we are designing people, we are designing for these people, we understand the context that they are coming from, right? We need to capture their behavior, attitudes, aptitudes, and we need to make sure that they are, their environment. Also, whenever we do enterprise design, there are a lot of legacy products that already exist. Rather than recreating something from scratch, we should understand why we are creating something and what problems they are trying to focus on. Understand our users' life beyond screens. Everything is not just solved by giving them a screen or solving the thing. Sometimes it might just be understanding their context. We might just be like, oh, you can probably sit and do this job, or just some ideas that can improve their lives. So this is basically what we typically cover in our research phases. Now, obviously, working in organizations, designers and researchers don't have the full liberty of doing what we are trying to do, right? There are always challenges that we are going to go through, which is pretty ridiculous, because we are like, come on, guys, we are doing such a good job. Like, why do we have to face any of these challenges? But working in enterprise design, since our users are so specialized at their skill set, it's very difficult to get hold of them. Again, our organizations, they sometimes don't see a lot of tangible outcomes. They don't sponsor research. And this is about also taking that time to be like, okay, we will need to do this, and we might take a month to do this or 2 months to do this. And getting that thing into the product roadmap is sometimes very difficult. So some of the best practices that we have discovered and that has worked for Aly and me is to basically have a good research plan, bring people on board to what we are doing, scope out the research, and partner with a research buddy so you're not doing this alone. It's always good to have brainstorming partners, which can make your work easy. Think about when you are in design, and over here, I'm including design and research as one block. Think about who are your internal partners and external partners, who you have to make sure that you have good relationships with to allow you to do the work that you are trying to do. Moving on, we are going to move on to our definition stage, that is setting boundaries. Now you have understood what your job, what your users do. So now it's about diverging and consolidating all of that. So once you've realized that the world is organized by the jobs that need to be done, you understand that product life cycles don't exist. Again, this phase is about synthesizing, modeling, and gathering requirements. What do you mean by synthesizing? Synthesizing is basically a collaborative process of sense making. You have so much treasure of information after you've done discovery. We need to make sure that we are making sense of the work and the chaos that we have understood. We need to organize this chaos. This is, by the way, one of my favorite parts, definition stage. I can spend a whole month just doing this, and because it's so much fun. Organizing chaos and basically getting everybody to common understanding of who are we working for. When these people have such specialized roles, we need to make sure that we understand who they are so that people are not just thinking about, oh, what features we need to put in the app, but it's about, oh, what problems do our users actually have that we need to think about, right? We need to model personas and customer journeys and service maps so that we can bring everyone with us to those common problem statements. We need to define the problem for everyone so that they can be working from there. And then is our stage of gathering requirements. So this is the stage usually where designers step in with the research and they are bridging this gap about, oh, let's understand, let's develop stories, let's define requirements, let's also define some jobs to be done, and finally start putting design components into some of these ideas, right? Challenges. Obviously, none of the stage have, some of our stages actually have a lot of challenges because we know how real things can get. Some of the things over here is that, again, not planning enough time for synthesizing. People just feel, oh, you just went to a trip last week. Don't you already have everything? Now, can we not like start designing wireframes? And it's like, no, but we have a lot of chaos. Should we just hand over the chaos to you? So people just not giving us enough time to do that, right? Product prioritizes features. Oh, we want this features. You found out the problem. Let us put in the features now. But it's like, no, you don't need to think about feature roadmaps. You need to think about product roadmaps. Not getting enough time to socialize what you have learned, bringing, again, these are specialized functions. So just making sure that we can bring everyone to that common understanding of who we are solving for. Some of the best practices that we have learned over here is, again, collaborating with people and making sure that people are onboarded with you. Creating these rich research artifacts that can help us identify that, oh, this is what a user goes through, but we see the problem over here. What can we do right now to make this thing simpler? So identifying some of those things by creating these artifacts. Again, one thing in enterprise design is something that I really like to point out, that if you're working in this thing, we have a lot of subject matter expertise. They are called SMEs. SMEs are basically a very good substitute for our users sometimes when it's very difficult to get our users, but also they are very good product partners to work with to help us fill that technical gap. Because we are designers, people forget that we need to understand about the domain first before we can even make sense of it. We don't know how a warehouse will work or how a financial broker app will work. And we have the skills, but we don't have the domain knowledge. So partner with someone who can make those things better for you, right? And again, we have a lot of industry frameworks that we can use to make this process easy. I can speak a lot about these frameworks, but again, we'll keep that for a later time. Journey maps, again, get a holistic view, bring everyone with you to understand that. So I'm going to take a pause over here and going to address any questions we might have. Again,
There's crickets in the chat, guys. Ask us questions. It'll make us feel like we're like explaining the right things.
I have a question.
You're right ahead.
yes.
All right. What is SMEs? I wrote it down, but I didn't really get what it was.
Yeah, subject matter experts. So there are people who have technical and domain knowledge about that subject. And when they work with you in companies, they will be called SMEs, so they are the people who actually probably help the customers to deploy the software after it's implemented. They work with customers as the tech representatives from your company. Again, they are very close to customer. They understand them. They try to work with them. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We have another question. What is the difference between enterprise design and service design? And is there a difference? It kind of sounds the same. So enterprise design is basically designing for business software, but service design exists in consumer application and enterprise application. Services, basically, you're not just thinking about one product, but providing an entire service, which comes from awareness. So what is a service for enterprise design, right? You create awareness about the product. You understand what that product consists of, how you move on. So different phases from say service through deployment to purchase, so awareness, purchase, deployment, implementation, maintenance, and continuing to support the client through that process. So that's an entire service.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to actually now hand this off to Aly, and she's going to take us through our next phases of design, development, and more, actually. Aly,
Okay.
to you.
I like this part, which is the reason why I'm taking over it. So pushing the boundaries essentially means that there's a lot of complexity that we are trying to design solutions for. It's not easy, and we can create great enterprise apps that are easy to learn and pleasant to use. So essentially being the funnel for all of these ideas and problems and just making sure that we have product babies that actually give value to the world. All right. So design is pretty much the same as if you were designing a consumer app, with a little slight differences. Just so you know, like design for people works so that they get their jobs faster and safely with less errors. So this is the whole context of enterprise design. For any beginners out there, the business outcomes that we're trying to design for could be actionable business intelligence, like streamlining workflows, increasing collaboration between different people, reducing operating costs for the business, and increasing the productivity overall. It's also designed for very busy environments, as Ashoomi has alluded to. You are designing for people who are multitasking in a very noisy, probably uncomfortable environment where their physical ability may be limited. So when you are designing the solution for this, you just have to keep that at the back of your mind and make sure that you test and test and test and test in the environment that your product is meant for, so that you can get the most out of that feedback. Now, with design in particular, reducing the number of clicks may reduce usability. And the reason why I call this out is because when you're working in very technically complex environments, you need to be able to guide your users through their tasks step by step. Because they're also working in a busy environment, you basically need to be able to manage their attention to focus on important tasks. And this is essentially by managing notifications, like when they're going to get stuff to them, what kind of data they're going to see at any given point in time. Now, for prototyping, same thing as consumer applications. I highly recommend you sketch out all of your design solutions, because there could be a ton of them based on the research that you have just done. You need to maximize the utility of the design system, because normally working in an enterprise software, you will have a design language or branding guidelines that you will have to follow in order to create this product, because they have to all look uniform at some point. So maximize that utility. And just for being able to manage design complexity when you're working through different stages of feedback, you need to be able to understand the type of fidelity you're going to be showing to your partners so that they can make better decisions about this product. Like, you will be surprised how oftentimes a simpler user flow will be able to get better feedback than a clickable prototype, because it is a level of abstraction that's enough to move things along. Now, any change you make in very complex applications means that it's a loss of efficiency for experts. Now, the people who are using your software day in, day out will have been experts at this point, and any changes you make to the front end will will essentially make them learn that product again, or will lose their efficiency in the process. So this is always a consideration that we have in mind when you're changing anything in the UI. Now, when it comes to iterating, it's always cheaper to do it in design than it is in development. Now, Ashoomi alluded to, there's not enough time put behind research to essentially understand user problems. One thing that your product people will probably push you on is, we need this now because our customers have asked for it. Taking a step back and be like, look, it's going to be cheaper for me to work through every design solution out there that we could possibly have for this product than it is for us to start shipping the thing that I just built like a day ago. Same thing. We need to be able to assess the design solution against the problem statements that we've already identified in the define phase. And this is incredibly important when you're trying to get to the next stage. Like, when you're iterating on something, like, the first draft is great. Get that out of the way. Second draft. Now, we're assessing it against oh, is this actually solving a user problem? Now, you're also going to have to assess that design against the success metrics that you've had with product and engineering. And this is very collaborative in that sense. Now, Ashoomi said what we could test with internal product experts. And this is super important, because when you don't have access to a lot of customers, and it's going to take some money, you will have essentially a panel of very useful experts to tell you what they know based on their very long experience in the domain. Testing in high fidelity to identify alternative paths the user can choose to complete their task is great as well. But in general, you might not be able to do this depending on how much time you have in the project. Now, the challenges you might face at this particular stage could be a fair few, but the thing that I would like to make sure that you understand is that legacy configurations and specialized hardware would be used. So back to Ashoomi's example, there is a wrist device for the person who is managing things in the warehouse line. For our customers, it could be a different control panel that's not a keyboard, so that they can like see cameras a lot faster, because you can get a lot more efficiency from specialized hardware than you would from generally using a keyboard and mouse. There's also a bit of a balance between getting buy-in for things that are already usability issues in the product versus fixing things that are technically complex in the back end and creating new features. So just keep that in mind when designing. And if you will have to cut to the bone, just make sure that that design that you are proposing actually addresses a myriad of problems, so that it actually can continue to be pushed forward and you're doing the best thing by your users. Yeah. Best practices. I highly recommend, if you're working with enterprise software, that you invest a lot of time in design operations, communication, and project planning. This will get you out of a lot of holes when it comes to communicating with your partners about design, priorities, delivery, research, and having the tool set that essentially helps you communicate a lot of this stuff really, really, really helps. Now, being able to create project plans in advance with your stakeholders, just knowing when you're going to be delivering this, and this is pertinent based on how much resources they give you, like what the approval time is like, and what they're going to be doing to help you get like the right design for them. Now, I also highly recommend, this is the best practice in UX in general, but separating your vision prototypes, which could be quite heavy, from your delivery prototypes. Like, you are validating new features, workflows, and design solutions with your product partners, but your engineers only want one source of truth for what to build. So just make sure you completely keep that separate so that nobody gets confused.
As you're doing this, can you also explain us the difference between vision prototypes and delivery prototypes?
Right. So essentially, they're all prototypes. Like, the delivery prototypes are meant to be targeted towards like helping the engineering team build the product. So there could be very detailed interactions. It could be using the design system to be like, hey, so this is the component that we're using from this particular, would like you to copy the design system. This is what it needs to be. Vision is more like really high level abstract concepts where like your product manager, for example, decides, I want to build this feature and I want to make sure that like enough customers say yes before we invest in delivering on this product. So these are all just high in the sky like kind of concepts that you haven't really thought about making yet, but could be valuable to the product down the line. And you want to make sure that before you spend millions of dollars in development, that you have the right solution for your customers at the end of the line. Does that help? Yeah, okay, cool. All right. And best practice design for this is essentially applying a role-based user management to simplify how multiple users will be using the same data across the applications. Knowing what your users are, what their workflows and responsibilities will be, because you will only ever want to reveal important functionality when they need it. Now, this could also be like applied to user applications, but this is especially important in enterprise because you are dealing with a lot of data and a lot of complexity, and any opportunity you have to introduce where you're reducing the errors that your users will be doing throughout like their task is definitely a benefit. Now, also understanding that this product needs to scale. So you are designing for local regions as much as you are designing globally. So you're going to have to be able to accommodate different languages. Currently, my product supports 8. They're looking for 16. The environments that it supports, like user ability and expertise, is variable across the different countries. So being able to ensure your microcopy is correct is incredibly important. Remember, the goal is to make this as simple as a consumer product, and any small design best practice that will help you get there is like incredibly important. Now, when it comes to building the product, this is this is the hairy part. The task of the development team is to engineer the illusion of simplicity. And let me show you what this is like. It essentially is orchestrated chaos. And this is the best part, I think, about designing for enterprise, because you're working with a lot of people with a lot of moving parts in order to deliver the right product to your customer. Now, what does this look like? So in general, development has the phases of collaboration, testing, and then measuring. So let's go through all of this. When you're collaborating with your engineering partners, your job as a designer is to negotiate and fight for a better user experience. Now, you're not doing this by yourself. There's also, we have flickering scheme. Okay, so we have engineers who like to share their expertise, and they're generally pretty helpful people. And you can usually find a way to, if you go the extra mile to make it easier for them, like with your delivery prototypes and making sure they understand what you're trying to communicate with their design, it will increase the chances that what they produce will match your designs. Amazing. You need to be able to define navigation principles, visual patterns. You're going to have to design assets, icons, animations, transitions, interaction states, in products that you might not be as modern as a lot of applications that we have now, but you will have to be able to work with your engineering team in order to make sure that you're delivering the best user experience possible. Apart from that, you're also working with a team who will definitely have more backend developers than front end, because there's a lot of complexity and the logic that needs to support that app. Now, there's a lot more collaborations that you need apart from your immediate partners, which is your product engineering. That will be your tech writer, because you need to make sure that your users understand how to use or configure the product if they run into any issues. You're going to have to work with the content team for microcopy, because there will definitely be a lot of chances where you're going to have to translate the term that you're using for a button into different languages. So just keep that in mind. Now, testing. Well, I cannot put exclamation points on this enough, but design QA should be an integral part of the development process. So you need to be able to get your hands on the latest developer environment to make sure that what they demoed actually interacts the way that you are intending it to. Now, you need to be able to test across multiple devices and multiple user environments, hopefully in the environment that your product is intended for, because this comes down to it is not something that you can design on a small screen and hope for the best. You need to be able to test all aspects of this product before release. Like, you need to be able to see how it installs. You need to see how it configures. You need to see how it is being used and how people can go from, oh, I'm using this version now. Now I'm going to go to the next one. It's not simple. Now, measuring would be the next stage. It's essentially when you release the product and be like, yo, it's doing well. Being able to automate product usage metrics for these things would be amazing, but there's usually a lot of privacy when it comes to what data that the companies that you're providing this software to will let you have in order to make sure that you're making the best product possible. So just making sure that you are tracking ongoing feedback about how the product is going in each new release. And if there's ways that you could do that with like soft launch customers, that would be great. Now, challenges in this part, apart from being quite lengthy and it'll be a long road to release, being able to estimate the time that will take for engineering to deliver features, test for quality, and fix defects is a whole bundle of problems in itself. But being patient with your engineers really helps with this. Yeah, so I did make a point about product localization and globalization. You have to really support different regional maturities and expertise. Just know that nobody will do the same job as like your ideal user. And you really have to understand how they work in different contexts and different environments to make sure that you're producing the right kind of software for the 80%. Right, and the last thing about this, so the best practices I would say is that you need to support any initiative that will increase testing resources for engineering. And seeing what it looks like in real time would really help you design for this product. You need to be able to balance design to fit development cadence, because it's not usually like, I'm gonna throw stuff over the fence. No, like you have to be working with your partners day in, day out, attend all of their ceremonies so that you can make sure that you're building the right product. Now, co-located development is generally best practice, but in general, when you're working in enterprise organizations, you are working in a distributed team. So oversharing is necessary. Just know that this is a collaboration, so you're gonna have to learn together and iterate on your processes so that you can actually get to build the right product. Things will change, just remain flexible and prioritize as much as possible. Right, any questions? Oh, there's a lot.
Yes,
Shall we pick out
have a
something?
question from Amanda, actually. One of the questions is, could you speak on the differences? Amanda, do you just want to ask your question, actually?
Sure. I was just wondering if you could speak on the differences in working with back-end developers versus front-end as a designer, because I feel like those conversations are different, and just a few examples.
Oh, yeah, they definitely are. So backend wants to know more about like information architecture. So you need to help them understand how the user sees the objects that they can play with in a different environment. Shout out OUX, and how they can interact with it, right? So knowing how a bit about how the backend is structured for the designers is especially useful, because you're having very targeted conversations about what kind of data you're going to be showing to the user, how this piece of data affects another piece of data in a different database, for example, and how those relationships give the enough information for your user to make decisions. That is a conversation I would be having with somebody who is more technically and backend oriented versus a front end where I'm just talking about how I want this transition. Oh my God, those pixels are off. Please fix that. They're also very different, but I think I say this. You need to know a little bit about backend development as much as you do front end, enough to be dangerous and actually move things forward. And if there is any gaps, usually your engineers are more than happy to take you through what complexity they're dealing with and explain it to minuscule detail so that you actually can help them engineer a better product so you can get better designs out the door.
We actually have one more question.
Oh, sure.
Another question is from Arnado. Arnado, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned components for bed. How do you how do you design at scale for the enterprise? Pretty much question.
Design for scale. Could you please give me a bit more context? Are you talking about UI components and design systems, or are you talking more about how do I get this piece of software applicable to a small business versus a larger organization?
It's really when you mention having localization and globalization, you really have components and you have these different, very particular applications, right? How do you take that interface and have it serve this many different kind of users, if you will?
Yeah.
Is the component architecture super the components are super scalable in your design system or something? If that makes sense.
I can.
So, oh yeah, you can go first.
Yeah. So recently, actually, I'm working on this application. So Arnado, so in this application, we are designing for multiple roles. And I'm understanding that's a part of your question. When you have so many people using one application, how do you think about that in terms of components? So we are basically designing one data table, right? So you come, and I know when I say data table, Ying and Havana are internally smiling or probably cursing, because they did conduct an entire data table exercise when they were in Honeywell. We were in the same team. So basically, think about a component like data table on a screen. Now you have to think about that this table will be used by multiple users And if this application is going to be role-based, to say that if I am a process engineer, I come in and I want to see that this table will have certain columns that need to be relevant only to my job. But now the same data table, when it's used by an operations engineer and not a process engineer, they want to see something that's relevant to them. So it's about customizing some of these components when it comes to the role and the job functions that they have. So we are not redesigning or re-implementing new components, but we are just hiding and showing some of the features based on your role, right? Like progressive disclosure too, like some of the components of like dropdown will have like 20 menus, but now you know who has logged in, sorry, 20 items, but now you know someone else has logged in, but that person only has so much permission. Oh, you will just see 5 items versus this person will do 10 items. Right, so some of the things can be broken down at the component level, and some of that could also be at a workflow level, where you will go from step 1 to step 5 versus this person will only go from step 3 to step 5. So yes, it's very difficult. And that goes back to what Aly was saying, sketch out your workflows, because if you have so many users, you might just end up convoluting by mixing these workflows. But if you have some of those sitemaps and task workflows in place, you will be able to think about this. But I'll let Aly also add to this, because I'm sure she's addressed some complexity in her designs too.
So part of the complexity of enterprise is managing the way, like the architecture that your users will be interacting with their information. So when it comes to like thousands, 100,000 of events, it's like when you're providing enough of a framework based on the research you said, like, this is going to apply to 80% of my customers, and this is like their standard operating procedure. It's knowing that they're going to put different information. They're going to have very different databases from each other, but understand like you're building a product with enough components to help them have that customizability, as well as like enough standard practices that will like disseminate like the best, I guess, best processes for that particular task within your application. So we're not really designing or the user experience we're designing is about information management more than anything else. Like, how do I interact with this data? Do I need to see this now? That kind of thing. Because that's very applicable across like a small business versus a large business versus something that exists in America versus something that exists in China. Like, yeah. But it comes down to your research, so that helps.
That was great. Thank you.
Nice. All right. Can we pause with the questions? Oh, we'll finish this off and then we'll get for more questions at the end. So integrating UX and enterprise teams. This is essentially a list of things that Ashoomi and I thought about when we are trying to navigate our UX career in enterprise. Now, just so you know, it's going to take time. You're going to ask, are we there yet? Usually the answer is no. You're going to continue learning throughout the journey that you had in 5 years. Now, or at least for me, it was 5 years. So when it comes to delivering great UX, you are developing as a designer as much as the process to deliver this product is definitely getting iterated on and being like developed over time, and it evolves. The UX methodology you will use will evolve over time, and like the relationships that you build will also only grow and increase over time and get stronger. So the only thing I would like let you know is like about enterprise UX is being extremely patient really pays off. Now, what does that mean? It means building strong relationships. You will not know anything. You will not know everything, and neither are you expected to, and you will not be able to do everything. So when it comes down to it, you need to be able to manage your partners and stakeholders really well. You need to be able to understand who you're going to be managing closely, who you're keeping satisfied, who you need to monitor, and you have to keep informed. You need to be able to, I think we've missed a slide. Oh, there we are. You just need to be able to see what they need from you as much as what you need from them and how you can help them achieve success. Like, this is working in an organization 101, but it's especially true for enterprise UX. Now, the second one is that you are iterating on your development process with your partners as much as you are iterating on the product that you're building. So UX provides a lot of compounding value when it comes to building product, because you are designing the process and how to build the product as well. Now, being able to identify reusable patterns, components to reduce development time, increase the product usability, and increase product quality is all really important value adds to your partners. You could also design the way that you communicate with them. You can't expect to ever throw designs over the expense and expect good outcomes, because it's just not going to happen. And I guess the last piece of advice we're going to give you is that you need to adapt any UX toolkit that you've used in the past to fit the organizational maturity. You're only ever going to earn your seat at decision making by helping your organization grow. So what that means is aligning UX methods to what matters to the organization and not being precious about following a certain UX methodology. Like, you need to own your knowledge of UX processes and tools and show how they can help your partners. And you will definitely need to articulate the value of UX over and over and over and over again. But the only way that sticks in anybody's head is to be able to see how that produces tangible outcomes for them. Yeah. Just so you know, you're not alone. The reason why we are holding this talk is because we want to let you know there's a lot of design resource communities and there's a lot of enterprise designers out there who are definitely nerding out over the thought of like building enterprise applications. So we'd like to share with you our knowledge so that you can actually want to be interested in this space and actually come over this side, because enterprise UX needs some love. Okay.
So why do enterprise UX? Thank you, Ali. That was fantastic. That was very engaging too. I'm so glad that you guys asked the questions that you guys did. But we are actually going to take this question to people in our audience who've actually done enterprise UX. So we can start with Havana. Why do you do enterprise UX?
I was hoping you would call on me. You know, when I watched, what was that documentary that came out about social media? The one that like exposed all this.
Oh, the social dilemma?
Yeah, social dilemma. I felt good because I don't do all that shady stuff. I actually help employees like with their jobs, with their work, making things less tedious, making things easier. I like tackling enterprise UX because you get to learn and appreciate the world so much more when you understand. Like, I mean, think about all the supply chain examples that these two mentioned in the beginning. And I think like I feel like if you can do enterprise UX, you can really tackle it anywhere, right? And I think also the soft skills you learn from doing enterprise UX, like navigating these very complex stakeholders. You know, it's easy if I can do user research with Facebook, that's 1 billion users I can get data from. But with enterprise UX, I have a very niche user base. How do I get to that person, right? And so I think a lot of the soft skills you learn from the process of doing enterprise UX are really valuable.
That's very well said, actually. Some of the people who are like hourly wages workers, like they work in businesses and they use your software. The perspective that they have towards life is so different. And when you meet them, the humility that you get about how life is and the trouble that they would go through, they're so diverse people that it's just fantastic to get that visibility too. So thank you for saying that, because that makes a lot of sense. Ying, these are the only 2 people in the audience that I know that do enterprise UX. So you can self-volunteer yourself after Ying if you feel like.
Yeah, I'll add to it. I'm glad that Havana mentioned like soft skills and many hats, because I think when at first you think, oh, what opportunity where I get to utilize different skills, wear many different hats, and you might think like, oh, like a startup, but actually there are so many niche needs and opportunities within a large organization, a large enterprise, where you can actually wear many hats, and actually going into those opportunities helps you strengthen those relationships across like different domains and different business verticals as well. So I think that's also like, you're not necessarily stuck in one corner of this large organization, right? It doesn't take much to reach out to somebody to understand their role, their needs, and to see like, oh, well, I can like help with this, and maybe that can come back around with ways that can help my particular product. For me, I started out in like consumer, or like in working in design agencies, right? And I appreciated working on these different like client and consumer and brand focused apps, very flashy and very exciting and everything. But I always, near the end of that part of my career, I felt like I was only kind of starting the relay, but I never got to be there to carry it forward and to finish it as well, to be really involved in that product life cycle, to really understand what are those complexities and challenges that I can test myself and grow my skill sets on, that are like after you kick off, you know, or after, you know, the initial phase. So that's what drew me into enterprise UX. I was ready for the challenge, and I knew I was going to get a lot out of it at the end.
It's fantastic. Do we have anyone else who would like to share their perspective?
So I do a little enterprise UX, and I do it at scale with online travel agencies and internal inventory versus external inventory, enabling, you know, kind of like producers to solve business problems as well. I think for me, the reason why I really went in that direction is because I spend a lot of time also building consumer products, a lot of social media apps. I built a dopamine feedback loop model. That was very negative. So I was just like, you know what, let's not do this no more. And I went first of all to pharmaceuticals. And then I ended up in basically travel and leisure and helping people go on vacation. I thought that was fun. And that's really why I do it, because, you know, helping people at scale do something fun is kind of cool.
Absolutely. I guess like the sticking point for me is that you learn a lot from your users as much as you learn more about the different domains that your product can end up in, because it's so targeted. For me, like when I mentioned, like I had to go to a prison, I had to go to an airport, like in order to understand where the software that I'm building is being used. And those are not like general environments that you will get to see in your day-to-day life. Like you will only ever, if you do manage to do this, you will get access to them if you're working on something very technically complex, because it's not easy to find those jobs. Havana?
Raised her hand.
Yes, I have a question. In the QA process, where you know, after the devs have started building, what's I've had this problem with every company I've been at, where the devs will start building, and because there are usually no front end developers, like there's a lot of UI discrepancies, and I find that I have to handhold a lot of those backend engineers or full stack engineers to create the UI. And then I also have to like figure out how to get in touch with the QA team, and like I haven't figured out the perfect way to interact with QA and how to provide those notes on builds. Bringing up these issues during sprint demos is way too late. That is not the time to bring it up. So I wanted to know, in your experience, how have you handled that?
I want to know this too.
For me, I also write my notes after the sprint demo, but as I said, like the best way that I have found in order to mitigate a lot of this is knowing somebody from QA who can get you the latest developer environment as soon as it builds, because keeping tabs on what is currently being built will be like, hang on, that's not right. Somebody needs to fix this. I'm going to make a ticket. I'm going to tell the product owner, because a lot of this is essentially small stuff that gets missed. It's not that the engineers don't want to fix these things. It's just that they don't see it because they're very technically focused. They want the product to work. They care less about the interface because they don't see the value in it just yet. But in these instances, there's really no moving away from hand holding your engineers to be like, look, this needs to be 5 pixels on. It needs to like fit within design components. It needs to fit design standards. A lot of that stuff, until your as a leadership invest in good front end, it's likely not gonna happen.
Right.
So,
I do want to add to that. So something that we are also trying in our team right now for design QA is including that in the process for developers to make sure that they work with you before they even are approaching the sprint demo. So when something like this has been accounted in a process, and again, when I say process, like it sounds very official, but it can also be, working this thing out with the PMs. When you keep complaining enough, sometimes they are like, okay, you know what, like, or just keep bringing stuff in sprint demos, and they will know how frustrated you are, and they will try to correct this by being like, okay, rather than bringing this up during sprint demos, how can we work with designers before they actually just call out in front of everyone else? So
Yeah.
that has something also worked where you are like, okay, just try to give this thing and make it a part of your process, so that they can actually make sure that they will work before they do the demo, and also work on the tools that they know, like put this thing in their Jira tickets, like, or put it on Confluence when you see the environment, so that you can take snapshots and create a Jira ticket and assign it to them. Because developers, like, again, putting yourself into the way they work so that they can work with you. I know we have a lot of questions, but Aly and I, we have 2 more slides, and then we will stop sharing our screen so we can see everyone's faces too. And I know Ying has raised her hand, so we'll get to that in a second. Again, recommended resources. These are some books that has really helped Aly and me in the way we have evolved in our careers. And I know I've actually loaned my book to Nia, which is inspired because I was like, everybody needs to read this book. So we really like some of these things. And again, this is not the one-stop shop to go to all the books. These are just some books that we said that you should, as you are getting into this, or just even understand design. Doesn't matter if you're an enterprise or consumer application. And we want to thank you for listening to us for almost an hour now. Also, special thanks to ladies at UX for giving us this opportunity, which was fantastic, Havana and Ying. And Ying for sitting through our multiple dry runs and helping us make this presentation super awesome. It was so much amazing feedback Ying gave us, and we are like, we need to make this thing work. So Ying, thank you so much for being patient with us.
Thank you. And also shout out to Nia and Keisha, our other co-workers.
Yes, Nia and Keisha for all the stuff that you guys did. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Ashoomi's right. Inspired is a really good book. I'm on the last chapter. I'm gonna give it to you before Thanksgiving, I promise. Thanks for letting me borrow it.
It's adorable that you're passing books back and forth. I love it. Well, thank you guys so much. That was so much amazing content and wisdom, and I hope people screenshotted some of those slides to help with their journey, as well as definitely that last one for the reading too. Yes, I raised my hand because I wanted to follow up on some of the a couple questions that we had earlier in the chat. This first one was from, I believe it was Natty. They had asked, or they said that they are a junior researcher and pretty new to the role, and curious about what is the specific value proposition that a junior researcher can bring to design teams.
Yeah. So, sorry, I didn't get the name.
Natty, did I get
Natty? Yeah, Natty. So as a junior researcher, again, if you are the only researcher, then the things can get literally different in how the research is developing in your team. So just to get a little bit of context, like, are you talking about a junior researcher in the team of research, or junior researcher in the team of designers?
I'm on a research team.
Awesome. And you have other researchers that you work with?
There's one researcher that I work with directly, and we also work pretty closely with the content team as well.
Amazing. Yeah, so multiple ways that at least I've found researchers valuable is when the research is conducting studies like VOCs, partnering with a junior researcher, helping them take notes, making observations, doing the Miro work. So if you guys are using Miro tool, capturing notes, synthesizing some of that. Also finding opportunities on when can we set out some surveys and finding issues where, usually a senior researcher can get very busy in actually doing some stuff, but then junior researchers can find value in opportunities when they are working with design to be like, oh, can we just create this study when we are trying to measure this? So some quick measure studies that can be really valuable. Ali, do you have anything for Natty on how you have worked with the researcher in your teams?
Oh, I currently work end to end, so I don't really have a research resource. It's unfortunate. I need one. But from the past, like the best way to do it is actually partnering with your designers to identify where there are usability tests that need to happen. So going out of your way to be like making the connections possible to make sure that like you have access to the users. You already understand like how to get your designers closer to your users. Designers to users. You should be the one bridging that gap as much as possible. It's also reaching out to different people in the design team for what they need help with, because there's a whole bunch of testing that I did mention needs to happen. And for most of the time, like a designer would be stuck, okay, so I need to design prototypes for this, but I need to validate them. Who can help me validate this? I don't have time to write the script. I don't have time to write the scenario. So how could like those small things really help help us get to better designs faster? It's just that it is a lot of time for the designer to try and understand what those would be.
Okay, another question that we had was from Alyanna, and they had asked, they were curious about like more examples of like a specific product that follows these different enterprise phases and steps that you've walked through. So, they can understand what are these actual companies, enterprise organizations that are out in the real world that they can start grounding themselves and learning from.